Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Morning Cup. I am so glad to have you back with us and joining us for today because we have Kristal DeFeo back, and I'm so excited because we just needed to have her back. She has so much more wisdom to share with us, especially when it comes to topics around self-love and vulnerability. Being from the therapy world, both of us, it's something that we are so passionate about. So it's like, let's have another conversation about it, especially because it's February, the month of love, and just really being able to hone in on what is self love, how do we navigate that, and where does vulnerability come into play.
hmm
So, for self love, Kristal, I would love to know, like, how would you define self love?
So thanks for having me again. I'm glad to be back. That's a loaded topic, but I guess the simple answer for what I believe self-love is just accepting your flaws and like just being open to growing, but being okay with making mistakes along the way. It's just like just embracing like everything about you, and not all of it's going to be perfect. And I've come to just realize that like I fall short all the time, but I've learned to just accept that like as long as I'm trying, it's okay. It took me a while to get there. I think you master it overnight, but I think life becomes easier when you accept you're going to fall short and being okay with that.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up too, because I do think it's a practice because some days we're so much harder on ourselves than others. And also too, you brought up a good point. It doesn't happen overnight. Like it does take time. It's something you build, just like going to a dance class. I know we both dance. You're much better. But more experience, I should say. But I think too, it's when we start out on something, we're not the best at it. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we are, sometimes we have that natural gift, but majority of the time we're learning it. We're adjusting to like learning new things. And even as we grow as individuals, like for reading, for instance, when we're learning the alphabet, we learn like the letters and then we learn sounds, all of that together. And then we
Mhm.
start reading and then we read chapter books and then we're reading textbooks and then we're reading novels and it continues on that journey and it just gets a little bit more challenging. But how do you adjust to that? So my question is for you is like how when things are overwhelming, how do you really pour into yourself for self-love?
Yeah, so I don't think I've ever been a person, this is me being vulnerable. I don't think I've ever been a person to like run to other humans, like guys and things like that, to kind of like fill
Mhm.
that like void, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people like tend to gravitate towards people,
Mhm.
if that makes sense, just to kind of fill
Mhm.
that void. And I think because of my own hurt and lack of vulnerability, like I didn't learn it
Mhm.
right away, so I didn't do that. That wasn't like my go-to.
Right.
So I had to find something. So that's where my spiritual kind of journey came in, where I was like, I don't want to run towards people. Like if I could build my spirit man up, or whatever they call that, your spirit woman, if you can build that up, and there was different ways that I did that, like by reading, like you said, or um just trying to learn more about it and going to those places where that I could get that. And then through that I was able, when I was able to learn that and then love myself, I was then able to have that like relationship with other people. So it had to be like spiritually built up first. And that's not for everybody, but for me, that worked.
I love that. And there are so many different ways, but I think too, it's the spiritual aspect. It's like going within and finding a higher power, a higher source, whatever we believe in too. But it takes it away from us to really stand in our power. It's kind of like watching from the outside of like, okay, well, what can I do versus reaching out to somebody else where it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be something that might be negative versus really being uplifting and positive that's really
Yes.
going to fulfill us. And I think that's so important what you touched on too, because our spiritual health is just as important as every other health aspect, like our physical, mental, emotional, financial, physical, all the different entities. But when it comes to our spirituality as well, I've been talking a lot about this actually with a lot of different individuals lately. And it's just really fascinating too, because it takes a lot of the weight off of us when we're
Yes.
able to do that. Like, do you resonate with that? Does that feel for
Yeah,
you?
I think that as humans, we're, like I said before, we're going to fall short. So
Mhm.
if somebody else's cup's not full and, you're in a bad place or need some love or your cup filled and you run to them and they're not operating at 50%, you know, it's not always going to be what you need at that moment. And so the supernatural thing is a challenge, because if we're so used to, you know, running for that physical or that like verbal affirmation, you're not going to get that right away, you know what I mean? And it's going to look different spiritually from a supernatural perspective. And so, you know, in the beginning, I was like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I need someone to like hear, like, it was just very foreign to me, like not understanding what a relationship with my higher power looks like, what it should look like, until you actually experience it. And then when I was able to experience that, it looks different. Like I said, then I grew to understand that it is real for me. And I could go there and in my special place and pray and do all those things and feel just as loved and warmth and not have to go, you know, running everywhere else for that. So if people could just be more open to that, I think that it's just a relief that, you know, you can find it in human beings. Don't get me wrong, but the spiritual thing definitely helps me with that.
I love that. And, you know, like also what you brought up about like reaching out to people, sometimes people are at 50% or not able to emotionally handle what you're about to tell them. And, you know, a lot of my friends, like they're in the therapy world, coaching world, and we kind of have this dialect of, hey, are you emotionally available right now to talk? Like, because it's true, because sometimes you do, like if you've done everything you need to, or you just need a voice of reason in that moment. Because I do think it's really important to find that within yourselves first and foremost. And then if we do need support, because everybody needs support in different kinds of ways, but that's one of the things we always say to each other. It's like, hey, are you emotionally available to talk right now? Or can you have that capacity? But that's true for what you're saying. Like a lot of people aren't. And I've had conversations with friends of like, hey, look, I love you. I want to be there for you right now, but I can't. Like I have some stuff going on. And being able to vocalize that, it goes back to like in the beginning when we were talking about vulnerability, like being vulnerable, of knowing it's okay to express yourself freely and not feel judged or shamed because you're saying I'm not available or I can't be there for you, and like people pleasers and all of those factors too. But I think it's important to remember recognizing that at the end of the day, we are responsible for our feelings and our emotions and how we show up in this world. And being able to have something of a higher power or the universe or whatever you believe in is really important too, because it takes it away from you, but you're able to reconcile with yourself within, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I think the hardest part, I sit on like two sides of it where I can see how people don't have that or don't understand it or don't want it because of trauma or whatever. You know, when we have nothing to blame, it's easy to say like, you know, God's fault or I hate God and all those things. And hearing the stories that I've heard, I understand wholeheartedly where all that pain comes from. And you know, some of my experiences haven't led me to think that way about my higher power. Like I had to learn about that in a different way. And we all experience things differently, you know? So I can see why it would be a struggle for a lot of people. And I've learned to have compassion and empathy for them. And when the time's right, share my story, because, you know, it's not for everyone. But I do feel like because I've been so hurt by people that if it weren't for that, like when you have no one to talk to, you don't trust anybody. And so like, it's like, where else are you going to turn? And then when you don't have that, like, I could see why people just decide to give up, you know? So I am blessed that I was open to that. And my experiences weren't to the point where like, I was so angry at a higher power, like I could actually be open to seeing what it had to offer. I'm really fortunate for that, because I could see like why people wouldn't have that in their life, you know? And it does make me sad, because it is the difference between keeping up with the fight or giving up. And that's how important it is to me. Like I'm that thankful that I had it and the opportunity to like learn more about it, you know?
I love that. And I love that that has been your experience where you have been able to find a different path that was helpful for you and really like fulfilling. And also at the same time being compassionate to others, because we all have different viewpoints and there's no right or wrong. And I think that's beautiful that like what you were able to find and that solid foundation that you have now, that's really created so much love for yourself too, and being able to handle life's curveballs. Because they're always coming.
No, it is. And not to beat a dead horse, but when you do get more like spiritually mature, I think that's the right word. it's almost like more things, in my opinion, have come against me, and you're more, especially for people who don't understand, you're more isolated and, I don't know, labeled and things like that. So it's like, it sounds all great, but like walking that out, it does separate you from the rest of the world in a way where it's like, is this even cool to be doing this walk? Like, no one really understands it. You know what I mean? At least like, so that's why it's important that I have the right people around me to support it, because I want to keep it, and it's made me feel whole. And it doesn't, maybe some people, couldn't relate to feeling like that, and I get it. But for me, it's important that I do share that part of my life, so it gives somebody hope, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I can open a book that, like, a lot of values I believe in, I can stand on and like read it. I know who God says I am. I know like what my purpose is. And like, I didn't always know that,
Yeah.
like, I don't know. And that's enough about that, but
No,
I
think it's
talk about it, but it's like important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of when you like define self-love too. It's every aspect of your life. It's not just having self-confidence. It's not just how we feel about ourselves from the inside out. It's also like the connection to others, connection to higher power, and going towards like what one thing you said about trust. It's hard to trust. And that's where like vulnerability comes in so beautifully, because it is when we've been burned in the past, or whether it's dating, relationships, family, friends, the fact of vulnerability comes into play of being vulnerable, telling your story, being able to feel safe enough to trust somebody with really trusted information.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that? So could you talk a little bit more about, like, for you, for instance, like when it comes to vulnerability, what do you think you've seen, like at least with your clients, especially now in the coaching world and just your past world too, in the therapy world, how have you seen vulnerability really open up people when it comes to trust, around trust?
That's a great question. I think that as long as people feel safe with you and connected, it's possible to open up. Yeah. And I've had people like work with me for over 2 years, like people I'm specifically thinking about, where it took that long, if not longer, for me to be like, okay, I'm moving to a different, career path, not a career path, a different job opportunity. And they're like, wait, but I wanted to tell you this, and it's just like the idea that like, I felt safe with you. It's just this overwhelming fear of opening up. And I don't know if that's just because people think they're going to be judged, or a lack of just trust. But for those people, it's like a weight lifts, gets lifted off of their shoulders. And that's what I experienced when I was finally able to talk about what was killing me inside. I was like, wow, like you could relate to this. You're not judging me. You've been through it. So yeah, I had to practice what I preached. I couldn't keep telling people, trust the process. And as long as you feel safe, I'm ready to listen when you are, when I wasn't doing that myself.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think too, it is something like, because I remember this with my clients when I was like leaving the therapy field and like terminating with clients, they're just like, wait, no, I had to like tell you this too. But I think it's also going back to like the shame, and like there's maybe guilt around it, or feeling like you can't open up because every relationship in the past has been there's been a pattern. Every time you open up, there might be a burn, or it's taken for granted, or it's being ridiculed, or just completely judged for something you might have done, or just experiences, or even something you didn't do that maybe was done to you, or those experiences, like real things that are happening on a day-to-day basis that we might not know about. But I think trust is the foundational piece of a relationship outside of communication. But communicating allows you to be vulnerable. It allows you to read the relationship too, because it's a chance you have to take, just like taking a chance on a relationship. You never know. People can be married 30, 40, 50 years and then find out something. You're like, wait, what? But that's part of it. I think that's a huge aspect of being able to build that foundation. And it sometimes starts with you opening up first. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, maybe not in like a professional setting, but like in personal settings, like dating and relationships, when you open up first, and friendships too, a lot of times it gives other people permission to open up too. And you'll be so surprised of how many people are like, me too. It's like, wait, what? I had no idea. You're so good at hiding it. Whatever it is, it could be the smallest thing ever, but how we perceive it could be the biggest thing. But that's the beautiful thing about building relationships and knowing that you can trust somebody until you can't. But hopefully it's building upon that and understanding when we are vulnerable, it makes our relationships better. It makes us be able to connect to one another. And a lot of times, I know like in the past, I didn't want to be vulnerable because I was like, oh, I'm not perfect then, or people are going to judge me. And the more I was vulnerable, the more I became human, to be quite honest. So I'm curious for your experiences of personal relationships in particular. What have you seen around like you being vulnerable, and like what has that done for your relationships?
I think before I became that way, I would say it literally took me probably till I was about 28 to, start talking about stuff. But up until that point, I thought what I'm about to tell you was part of just me and my personality, but it was really like this facade of like, I'm this like badass, like semi-sarcastic, blunt, speak my mind, like rough. And people would kind of say like, like I'm kind of like not scared of you, but anybody that kind of just met me, I just had this rough exterior. And now like looking back, I'm hearing a lot, like whether it's my mom or just different people that I'm giving the time of day to like just show them my heart. It's like, you have such a big heart. I'm like, even now, I'm like, I literally said this the other day to somebody. I was like, oh, don't say that. Like, I don't want to be known as this like mushy like person that's now like, big, has a big heart. And so that was my defense, was always being like, I'm not going to talk about my feelings. I'm going to be this badass. I never cry. I used to say that all the time. I never cry. But I think underneath all that was just this person screaming, like, I really just wish people didn't think I was such a badass all the time. And I want people to actually like ask me like, is everything okay? So now I'm okay with crying.
That's good.
And honestly, I don't want, like when I told the person the other day, like, I don't want this like big heart. Inside I was like smiling, like, you're not the only person that said that. My mom's been saying that a lot, like just different people and it feels good to be recognized that like I'm trying, and I'm not this like cold-hearted, like mean badass.
And well, you know what? I think that's so true too, because a lot of people that have that hard exterior, they are so soft on the inside, but it's been experiences and just maybe fear of it, like potential experiences. It could be everything. But I think too, when we allow ourselves to cry, to release, crying is so good for us. But I think especially growing up, like a lot of young boys were told, don't cry, like men don't cry, boys don't cry. And I think that's held back a lot of generations too, because being able to communicate and be vulnerable in relationships, just even seeing it from like male friends or people I have experienced relationships with as well, like where it's been difficult for them to communicate in my earlier years. But I think that's part of growth too. And the more times that we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, it can open up so many doors too, because you just don't know what could happen from there. And it could really build upon such a strong foundation.
And it's also experiences too that soften people, I would think. But like there was a point where it was uncomfortable for me to like hug people or to like receive a hug or to say I love you first. And not because I had a very loving family, do not get me wrong, but we showed it in a different way.
How did you show it?
It was like known that we loved each other, like so it's just like I can understand when people get a little uncomfortable if you touch them a certain way or say like I love you. It's just an expressive thing, and it's a lot of learned behavior. So I can get that if you're not taught that or grow up with it, or it's just showed a different way. But that's what I know. Like if it makes you uncomfortable to say like I love you or I like you, I really care about you, or any of like now I don't care. Like if I feel it, I'm saying it. And before I used to just cringe like but I like this new me.
It's just another layer to you, as we grow too. It's like our experiences and just as we learn too. I think it's not just growing, but like the education we get or the experiences we get, or experiencing somebody who might be super vulnerable and you're like, oh, hold on. But it's like also gives you that idea of the different types of people too, and like their level of vulnerability, and everyone's going to be different. But I think the most important thing, especially just looking at like self-love, like
Yeah.
how are you vulnerable with yourself? Like how do you trust yourself when it comes to making decisions with relationships, with information you're going to tell? Before, like I wouldn't say anything to anybody, and now like people that matter to me, they know everything, and I
Yeah.
don't hold back because I'm like, well, I don't want anything ever left unsaid.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of like with self-love too. It's how do you think those two really correlate together, like when it comes to self-love and your vulnerability?
Well, I heard the other day this, I don't know the exact quote, but it was like, if like whatever you say or speak, right, is like
Mm-hmm.
a reflection of what's in your heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like if I say on one end, I don't care what people think, but I do, like we all do, right? It's just
Yeah.
like a natural. And if I want to be perceived or known as somebody with a big heart or empathetic, right? Like
Yeah.
I have to check the condition of my heart. So if I'm not
Hmm.
kind to myself, I'm not going to be kind to other people. And finally, I can say I am a lot gentler, not only to myself, but I notice that in my relationships now. I'm not quick to cut people off anymore, or
Mm-hmm.
be that badass. Like I said, I'm just a lot more compassionate, not just empathetic. So I need like a mix of both, so that's what I would say. Like I just had to check what was in here, heal, because it is a lot of like pain and trust and all these things, and you don't
Yeah.
realize that how that translate the way you're talking, the way you're acting, how you're treating other people,
Mm-hmm.
and I got tired of like hearing like you come off like this or you come off like that. Like I don't want to come off that way. I just want to be myself and be like kind.
Yes. It's being authentic, right? It's being
Yeah.
authentic to ourselves. And I think too, it's
Yeah.
interesting when you talked about just having compassion for others and yourself, and it starts with ourselves. I know a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this, like from earlier on, where I was so compassionate towards everybody else, but
Mm-hmm.
myself,
Mm-hmm.
there was like no compassion. Like it was just like I was so much harder on myself. And I feel like a lot of people are so much harder on themselves sometimes. And there's the question, like, would you say that to your best friend? Absolutely not. But then you say it to yourself. So it's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, hold on. But I think when we're able to recognize too where we're lacking compassion, or we're giving ourselves like grace and like room to mess up or make mistakes and just move forward from that, or even when we are being vulnerable about something, it's sometimes we might not want to be vulnerable because we're not sure how the reaction is going to be based
Yeah.
off of what we're saying, that information that we're delivering. But if we're coming from a good place and we know, okay, we made a mistake or it's something that's super personal, being able to vocalize that too, I think it's taking that step back and looking at it. Okay, well, I'm speaking my truth, and this is my truth. I can't change it.
Yeah.
It's already happened, but it's giving yourself that compassion. So I'm glad you brought that part up, though. It's like having compassion for yourself. You're going to be able to have compassion for others. But on the flip side, people can have so much compassion for themselves, but maybe not other people.
Yeah. I think there's two sides. You could like definitely have too much within and then be selfish. And then the other way where it's like just people pleasing and you just want everyone to like you and want to do the right thing, but you don't feel that way inside. So there's definitely like two dynamics to it, but I think it's like finding a healthy balance for sure. And then you nailed it because you obviously out of that, you recognize you were doing too much of one of them and created your whole boundary thing. So like
Yeah.
you recognized it was like too much. I got to work on this because I'm losing myself. So it is
Absolutely.
just kind of like a big, balance.
Yeah. And speaking of boundaries too, like for instance, like self-love, a lot of people are like, well, that's selfish. Like, what's your take on that whole trend and like thing that's always going around, like, oh, self-love, that you're being selfish? Like, how, I know you said there's a balance, but like, where do you like how, I know I already asked you like how you define self-love, but like to go a little further, what would that look like? Like on a day-to-day basis for you, what does self-love look like?
I mean, I feel like whoever has said that, I haven't really heard too much of that. Like it's selfish, but if people think that way, then they're probably just taking it out of context.
I
Like,
just had
oh,
to
I
throw it in
love
there.
myself and I hate everybody else. But I
Sometimes
would
it's
say,
subtle. It's subtle sometimes.
I would say day to day, it's just treating yourself how you're supposed to be treated. But like people, I know it sounds weird to say that out loud. Because
No.
yeah, if somebody doesn't, if you're not used to, like I said, the whole family dynamic, if you're not used to that, I can see why people would run the other way, right? Or just not like feel like they're worthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just it's a perspective for one. Like I need to love myself, value myself, have worth, which is like a whole process in itself, because if you don't feel that, then it's time to heal and get there, right?
Yeah.
But then like further than that, it's just these little actions. Like if you show somebody you care about them or love them, we all have different love languages, right? So what do you do for that person that you could do for yourself?
Right.
And so for me, am I supposed to give an example?
I mean, yeah, I would love for you to give an example.
Let's see. So I receive love with quality time. Like when people spend time with me, like that means the world to me. So this sounds really lame, but I like spending time to myself, which is why like my circle is very small. Yeah. And I'm okay with being alone. Like I love my quiet time. I love my singleness, well, for now. But it's given me time to really learn myself and understand what's important to me, instead of being distracted and running to other people and doing all that stuff that I, was doing. And you just sit with yourself and be okay with my thoughts, right? And when I'm not okay with them, then channeling them the right way and being vulnerable. So you cannot do that if you're constantly distracted and running to other things. And so you just made me realize, like, the very way that I receive love is how I give it to myself, through quality time.
Welcome.
I don't like
welcome to the morning cup. Said welcome to the morning cup.
I know, drop the mic. I was gonna say, like, yeah, you constantly should be learning new things about yourself, but I'm not that person that would like run out and just buy all these things. Like some people do that, like that's self-care. Like I'm just gonna like go like spend my whole paycheck on myself. Yeah, and I can do that in a balance, don't get me wrong, but none of that stuff fills me up. Like I can be out the next week and it's like that whatever I got last week, it doesn't even matter. Like it's just a temporary fix.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, I just want to highlight something that you said. So with self-love too, it's being able to be alone, because I feel like a lot of people jump into relationships sometimes or other factors, other things that like become a problem or overwhelming that they're spending a lot of time doing that might not be the healthiest thing. But I think when we're able to enjoy our own company, it's like bringing in that partner or significant other, that it's the bonus. Like you love your life already, and they're the bonus to that. And I feel like that very strongly about that, because just like you, I took about 2.5 years, 3 years of not dating anyone except myself. And it was like the best experience of life, because now it's like allowed me to meet my person now. But like being able to do that, I think is so important, of understanding what do you like, when you're upset, what do you do? How do you fill yourself up? Because no one person can give you everything you need except yourself. Yeah. And that's why, like what you said, I just wanted to really amplify that, because I think it's really important to remember like the company of yourself. Because I mean, I love people, but I need my alone time too, and being able to regroup and pour into myself. And that's exactly what you're saying too, if I'm correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like a simple concept to be like, because people tell you that all the time, like, hey, just be okay with being by yourself. And yeah, you can't run to other people for these things. Like it sounds really simple, but when you're lost and you don't have that like control or that clarity, then it's like, well, where do I go? Or like, where am I supposed to get it? Or what do I do? I don't know. So I can see how that would keep people stuck for sure, which is why that spiritual thing worked for me. Cause I was like, okay, I'm going to figure it out. It's working for other people. So maybe I should learn something and apply it. Right. And it worked. And I was gonna say something else. I lost my train of thought, but it's okay.
Well, if it comes back to you, let me know. But I do have one question before we get into like my rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
Well, not rapid fire, but they're quick. I want to ask you, what is like the two biggest thing, like one of each, self-love and vulnerability? What do you think are the most important things to remember about each for everybody to know? I know that's a loaded question.
No, it's a really good question. So for For vulnerability, it's so silly. I was going to say, just watch Brene Brown. But if I had to
I
say,
know. I talked about that in my last video.
yeah. But for that, I would just say, when you don't open up, you leave yourself, you could leave yourself sick. Like, a lot of the reasons why people suffer mentally, physically, emotionally are because they're sick inside with their thoughts and just pain, right? And when that stuff stays trapped, I don't know what else is it going to do? It's going to eat you alive, right? So I just feel like if you could just practice that, and even if it's a little bit at a time, like, it's just one step closer to not feeling sick. And I don't know if that's a good analogy, but
no, I think that's a great analogy.
And then for self-love, I would say, like, it is possible to love yourself, because I feel like people need to hear that, you know. And if you struggle with it and you don't know how to get there, there's people like you and me that like live that, walks through it, and you're in a good place now, and you could share it with somebody you care about because of it, you know. I don't think we're meant to be alone. We're not. Like Brene talks about it, like, we thrive off of connection.
Yes.
And I don't want to be single my whole life. And yeah, for this season, I was forcing myself to. It did what it was supposed to do. So I don't kudos to people in relationships right now. You know what I mean? Like, that's what we're supposed to do, you know?
And it's, I think that's true. And I think connection, it's not just romantic relationships, but also friends and family and people that matter in our lives, because you're right. Like, it's different seasons, different times. And I think the most important relationship out of every relationship is the one we have with ourselves.
Exactly. Yes.
I love the answer. That was amazing. So I have some fun questions for you before we wrap up, because I feel like we could continue to talk and talk. I'll have to have you again. But so the first question I have is, who is your hero?
Woo! So I would say my hero is my mom. Do you want an explanation? She's been like a backbone. I trust her with my entire being. Like, yes, all of me, just trust her. I respect her. I look up to her, and she's like somebody who has been through hell and back, and you would never know. And that's the woman that I always strive to be. So
we love moms.
We love
moms are the best. So my next question is, what motivates you to work hard?
My family. I did post something the other day that said I'm striving for the life that I wanted to build. And that sounded kind of selfish. But like, now when I read it, I was like, oh, like, I don't intend to live it by myself. Like, I'm doing it for my family, because we've been through a lot. And if I could, in my brain, I'm successful. Like, I could lay down at night and be like, you know, I've done everything that I wanted to do. But I mean, like, monetarily and reward wise, I think like God has more for me, and I would love to like bless them with that one day. So.
I'm like, I'm really feeling this. This is great. Okay, you ready for the next one? What if you were a superhero? What powers would you have?
I would say I would want to be invisible, you know, so I could just like go through walls and stuff. But like, no, I don't want to do that. If I were I would have like, what do you call that? Like, not time travel, but like if I could just teleport somewhere, like go to like Bahamas for the day and come back and not miss work, I would do that.
I love that power too.
I love traveling, and there's just like not enough time in the world.
You're absolutely right. Maybe it's already being invented.
Yeah. Just like, I'm going to go to South Africa really quick, jump on a safari, and I'll be back in like an hour.
Yeah. It's just a quick trip. Quick hour away. Love that. That's a great one. I'm taking that one. Yes. So if you could share a meal with any 4 individuals, whether they're living or dead, who would they be?
Marilyn Monroe.
Okay.
Like, number 1 on my list.
And why her?
Yeah, I love her. But like dead, wait, dead or alive people?
Both.
Oh,
Either.
Okay. Okay. So Marilyn Monroe,
Mhm.
and probably I really can't think of another three. Is that weird?
No, she's your person
She's like the
that you
only
want to meet. It's all good.
person. I mean, maybe Oprah. Actually, yes, Oprah for
Okay.
sure. I would like to meet Oprah. And that's about it. Let's just keep it at two.
Powerful women. I like it.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like it would be a really good meal. Good conversation.
I know.
So, what is the most daring thing you've ever done?
The most daring thing I've ever done, probably I've done a lot of dangerous things, but I guess more like jumping out on what do you call that? Like taking a risk.
Mhm.
I've definitely moved across the country for 3 years and
Mhm.
lived in Arizona, and I succeeded at that thing. Like I went to college out there, but it was like I wouldn't say I put myself in a lot of scary situations, but I definitely was like, you know what? Like I'm from this small town, like grew up really sheltered, thank God, because my mom is great. She hears that she's gonna be like, no, you didn't. Yes, I grew up very sheltered, but for me, it was like the biggest risk, like 3,000 miles away. I don't have any friends, don't have any family, and I killed it. I did so well. So that was risky. And then the other thing, I was thinking about this earlier. I worked at an all boys alternative high school when I in 2013. I was like a unit counselor there, and I was the third female hired on the entire campus. The school it opened in like 1850, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, don't quote me on that, but it was like a very prestigious alternative school in this country. So I was the third female hire on the entire campus. It's all male staff, all male adjudicated delinquents. And that was, when I tell you, the scariest interview I've ever done. But I ended up working there for almost 3 years, and they closed for child abuse. So I did get out of there, but it was a very scary place and not a good place to be. And I block it out because I was there for a reason at the time, I believe, but I think that was like super risky. Why did I think I could work there? But I did it.
Well, it built character too. This is why I love it. There's so many similarities because I worked at an all boys Catholic high school for a year as a therapist.
Wow.
There was like the brothers that like worked there and stuff, but there was a lot of more females than your school. But I think too, it builds character, it builds boundaries. You're able to really assert yourself in an authority figure and be really what's the word? Just really focused on what's important, what's not, and how to navigate like what you were doing as well. So I think that's amazing and very brave, especially being a female, a young female going into something that's could be potentially dangerous too.
Yeah. And I look back at my whole career, and I know I'm still young. Like I sound really old when I say that, but even in this 12 years, I feel like I have challenged myself and put myself in situations most tinier females wouldn't. I guess maybe it's just a stereotype, but like environments, let's say working with a really not strong, what's the word, a challenging population, and not coming from like all their backgrounds and having to run groups with hardcore criminals and recovering addicts and stuff. And it's just, there could be a lot of fear there, but I just kept pursuing it. And it's like the most risky thing I've ever done, but I would never take any of it back because obviously that was my purpose.
And it led you to this point too. All those experiences, it just builds that character. It builds your understanding of people on such a deeper level too, in different walks of life, and just being so open and like being able to receive other people's vulnerability in those situations. I love that.
Yeah, and that's why I don't judge a book by its cover, because it's not about female in your size or anything. If you have a voice and you have like a gift and a passion, you can literally do anything, and I'm like living proof of that, because I had no business being in some of those environments, but I succeeded at it.
Because you're a powerful woman.
Yes.
You're a powerful individual, not even just woman, individual.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So more lighthearted question.
Sorry.
What's the phone app that you use the most?
The most commonly used phone app?
Like any app that you use on your phone.
Well, let's look at my home screen really quick.
Perfect. Real time, people, real time.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I use Instagram, and then every single day I do log into my Daily Bread app, which is a morning meditation. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, beautiful.
So yeah, between Instagram, Daily Bread, I juggle between the two.
I love it. See, I learned something new. I've never heard of Daily Bread, so adding it there. Perfect. What was the last book you read?
The last book that I read, I had a 30 days with God. It was another meditation. So my 30-day devotional, and that's basically it. I have 2 that I have to start reading, but I didn't start them yet.
Well, I'm excited to know more about the books you're going to start reading. I'm always adding things to my list, and the viewers can watch too, or listen to. So the next question I have is, who would you want to play you in a movie of your life? Who would be the main character as you?
As me? Oh my goodness. Jim Carrey.
I love it. I was not expecting that.
Yeah,
that's great.
Because I know he would do it really, really well, and I love him. So
that's a perfect combo. Maybe he'll listen and hear that one day.
I know.
One day soon. What's your favorite family recipe?
My mom cooked a lot of good stuff, but I always loved her rice, like Spanish food. But she can literally make anything. But I'm just gonna stick with like red rice and beans.
Classic. If you had to describe yourself as an animal, which one would it be? Like your spirit animal.
Okay, not an animal I look like, an animal that personality wise.
Yeah.
Maybe a monkey. Is that weird?
No. Why a monkey?
Because they're really smart.
Yeah, they are.
Super smart. I like learning things. I feel like I'm full of wisdom for my age, at least, and that's not me being like cocky. And they love their families, you know, and they're silly. I just think I'd probably be a monkey, or like I'm not a mom yet, but like a tiger, one of those cats, a wild cat, because I definitely always persevere. And that's, yes. So those 2.
I love it. Those are great animals. Good choices. I could see them. I could see that in you.
You weren't expecting a monkey, were you?
No. Okay, just a couple more questions. So what's one thing that you can instantly make your day better? Like one thing that you can do and it just instantly it's better.
I love dancing.
What kind of dance?
Salsa dancing. And I make sure I go at least once a week. I just love it. I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but I think that for me is such a healthy outlet. Well, anything could be toxic. Like there's bars there and lots of boys, so I probably could make it toxic if I wanted to. But for me, it's all I know. For me, it's about the music and the connections that I'm making, and just the art. Like I really enjoy watching it and learning new stuff. So
salsa dancing is very fun.
Yeah.
So last 2 questions. What's your favorite way to spend a day off? So when you have a day off, what do you do?
Lately, I've been just doing adult things, but ideal day would be probably going for like a decent hike. I love being outside, like walking or running. Definitely working out, doing something physical, I would say. And I think that's about it. Maybe, yeah. I can't say the beach because we don't have any close to here unless I get my teleport, superpower.
So see, hey, it comes in handy. Brings it all back. Full circle.
I also have like a niece and a nephew. They're newborns. So I'll go up to my brother's house on my day off because I love being an aunt. I learned. So that's basically it right now.
That sounds like a great day. And then what's something an outsider that wouldn't know about your industry, about the world you're
Oh,
in?
that I've met some of, well, let's reiterate, was a drug and alcohol counselor, just in case people miss that. So I would say that I have met the most creative, intelligent, and this is all positive, I'm not being sarcastic at
No,
all,
I know. I know.
incredible human beings that have just been through some really unfortunate, crappy circumstances. And that's the biggest reason I did not only the course that I told you about last session, but it just made me realize, like, we're not all that different. And there's such a bad stigma on addiction, you know, and people that battle with it and things like that. Like, the world's so sick of hearing about it, but it's a real prevalent problem. And there's a lot of awesome people that unfortunately, like, didn't really have a choice. Let's just say that. And people would, that's like a whole conversation, would open up a whole door of it being a choice too. But yeah, that's what I would say. Like, you don't know until you're in it to understand.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and chatting with me this last 45 minutes or so.
Yeah.
But before we go, one final question, I promise. I just want to keep talking, but
It's okay.
where can people find you? I'll add the links again, but just make sure so people know where they can find you and hear more about you.
Yeah, so I have a Facebook page. It's True Me, Kristal DeFeo. My name's spelled weird, Kristal. But anyway, Instagram is probably the best way because everything's kind of on there. And it's my personal account is Kristal D1203. They can find me through your page too because we're friends. And my website, it's truemes.com, truemes.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure. And definitely go check out Kristal and all the wisdom that she has coming, her course. I'll link that as well, but definitely check it out. It's amazing from everything I've heard about it, and you won't be disappointed. So thank you, Kristal. I'll see you soon. Everyone,
All right,
thanks for
thank
joining,
you.
and make sure to like, subscribe, and we'll see you soon.